Alright, Union Pacific Railway Thermite Weld Rail Tech Boet. For the proper welding specific with essential installation of the quality thermite weld, continued safe with operation. Union Pacific Railway Personal Protective Equipment Safety General Replacement Rail Weather Restriction Identifying Rail Type Alloy Standard Determinant Weld Location Compromise Weld with Compromise Transition Rail Speed Restriction Alloy Rail Elimination Bolt Holes Reference Mark Remove Defects Torch Cut Rail Pullers Clearing Rail End Gap Standard 1-inch Wide Gap Weld alignment slot system creating crown standard wide gap weld realignment straighten compromise mold base plate packing mold base plate packing position flag base and preheating procedure oxy protein and equipment starting preheat process monitoring preheat process rail tech propane compressed air rail preheater crucible ignition pouring. Minimum takedown times, remove excessive mold, rough grinding, finishing grinding, welding tolerance specification, identifying weld, clean up the thermite welding quality, audit thermite head, wash, fill weld, repair preparation, welder's log booklet, dye penetration test, torch height, molds, clamp, preheating oxy fuel, torch preheating, forced air propane, torch takedown times, protected welding from cooling, grinding, cleanup required molds and equipment. Alright, rates of grinding hard heat basically the same, but the Oxy Fuel hard hat would be the added absorbing thermite preheat. See the move weld mold material, the hard hat protection, eye protection, safety glasses will Safety. The presence of moisture thermite portion of the crucible can lead with a rapid buildup, the uncontrolled release of the steam of the thermite reactions further may cause the ejection of molten metal with the crucible. Therefore, thermite proportion crucible to mold must be dry with the moisture but not allowed to enter of the system before during the welding process. Moisture will also cover the weld as being effective. General, the instruction below with the file with the installation of the thermite weld, the instruction below with the reinstallment of the rail tech thermite weld with the rail tech material with the mold portion with the premix packing sand crucible. The UV install with the rail tech welds and individual thermite weld with the small with the weld to perform the preheating of the rail ends. All thermite weld with the reference mark with indicate the original amount of the rails to be trimmed the mark. Do not use the wet crucible mold with the thermite oxide charge to make it a weld with the moisture enter the crucible mold and recharge and suspect with being present in one of them discourage the damaged item for discharge charge with igniter with contact local management environmental field operation for instruction on the proper disposal. It is critical stress of the success of the weld, no shock with the vibration curve of the rail during the solidification process of the mold and steel with the recommended shelf life of the weld kits is 3 years. Weld kit must be stored with a dry location stacked no more than 3 kits high. When you use the mold kit, inspect crucible with loose sand and the crack loose thimbles. Molds are broken with the weld within pieces should be not be used. Use standard mold with the rail end mismatch up to 1/8 inch. Use the new to warm weld rail ends marriage match 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch. Compromise weld different rail base and widths may not be installed with a class 4 above main track with on subdivision regularly scheduled passenger trains to operate. Subdivision in excess of 40 million gross tons. Not recommended thermite weld and non-curve of the worn rail with the section curve of the worn rail, especially on the high side. Over the curve of the maximum difference of the curve of the rail head should not exceed 1/8 inch. Gate side with the rail head with the measurement of the curve wherever it should be taken on the top of the rail head, except for the mismatch by the tape of the grinds and move with the smooth transition. Proper location thermite weld center of the curve of the reinforcement weld mate strap with the thermite weld with only under the following circumstances with any FRA class with the track compromise thermite welding area between the different section weld rail base where the thermite weld may involve the LA one or both rails. Replacement rail. All replacement rails give the ultrasonic temperature provided in accordance with the engineering track maintenance field handbook. Replacement rails give the maintenance with welding must not be less than 15 feet in length. Vertical difference must not exceed 1/4 inch. Use compromising transition rail with a 6-inch base rail with a match ends exceed 1/4 inch main track and siding. Torch cut rail ends must have at least 2 inches removed with the rail saw with the rail end ground down. Eliminate mismatched ground portion of them must be cut out with a replacement rail installed with the main track. Prior to thermite welding, rail ends must be squared or get proper crown. Weather restriction, weather, serve the air temperature, weather conditions are present, observe the following precautions. Do not make thermite welds alloy rail when the rail temperature is below 32 degrees. Do not make any other welds where the rail temperature falls below 5 degrees. When rail temperature is below 40 degrees Fahrenheit and the wind condition, thermite must be covered immediately after ensuring it with a cooling end cap of the welding blanket and weld cools below 700 degrees to prevent welding from cooling too quickly during light rain, sleet or snow or mist. Do not begin welding process unless properly protected with wet weather. Thermite welding process already in progress, particularly weld, except for the moisture to stop the welding operation. Take the following measure to prevent moisture from entering the mold crucible. Welding charge welding 10 with a solid tip at the top of the alloy to prevent moisture from entering the mold in the crucible. Use an umbrella is allowed that only the moisture can entirely prevented with the entire molds and crucible. Inch for the rain and sleet and snow mitts for the does not contain the rail placing the weld detention rail contract. The rail puller weld when conditions required to prevent rail movement. During takedown, all welding mold remnants and slag must be placed and eliminated. All have, including slip, trip, and fall hazard. Before applying molds, use rail thermometer, pyrometer, check the rail temperature. If the rail temperature is below 30 degrees Fahrenheit, warm the rails as follows. Heat 30 inches to 36 inches for the end of each rail. With the rail, the temperature between 90 degrees to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. If they added supplemental heat, remove the surface of condensation. Identify the rail type alloy. Standard rail type must be standard. Different rail chemistry to determine the specific maintenance of the welding requirements. Determining weld location. Do not weld on top of the tie, but ensure that the two good ties immediately under each side of the weld proper support. In the figure 110. Do not place thermite weld closer than 30 inches of the existing weld or in-track weld and on subdivision equal to the greater 75 million gross ton as specified by the chief engineer. Make thermite welds at least 15 feet from the existing rail joint. The thermite weld for at least subdivision must comply with the 15-foot rule for the TMP homepage link with the name. The 15-foot weld rule subdivision special track will work include with a switch of rail crossing diamonds. Make welds at 30 inches from existing weld joint welded in any type of subdivision of less than 75 million gross tons not specified by the chief engineer. Make thermite welds at least 30 inches from existing rail joint welded at any time, and in order to prevent welding clusters, multitude thermite welds installed closely together. No more than 4 thermite welds are allowed in a 39-foot section of rail. Compromise weld with identified hand joint with the welds are fouled with the hand in between the joints back door of the large rail from a smaller rail. The joint left side will be designated as left hand. On the joint right side will be designated the right hand. Refer to the figure I'm showing the failed out large rail, smaller gauge side left joint, right side larger side. Compromise weld kit not interchangeable to do the different base offset with a gauge on gauge field side with the gauge side base of the base offset at 1/8 of an inch, failed side base offset at 3/8 of an inch. Due to makeup of the compromised wheel between the rail, different rail chemistry for the different width base for the between 136-pound alloy and 119-pound standard carbon rail. If the rails with a different base width with a different chemistry must be joined with the welded standard carbon rail the same way with the section of the alloy rail to the alloy rail. Let the rail cut in must not be less than 15 feet. Make compromised weld butts between the rails with the same chemistry. Shows compromised welds on opposite rail should be made with the same crib. Compromise and transition rail. Even the compromised transition rail when required to reduce, eliminate. Even the compromised thermite weld with the main track with a siding. See figure 110E. Standard drawings are available only with the engineering drawing page, website, procedure, and standards. Speed restriction alloy rail for the all thermite welds involving alloy rail restrictions, maximum 30 miles an hour for a minimum of 24 hours after installation. Do not remove the speed restriction until all thermite welds in class 3 above the tracks are inspected protected with weld mate straps. Eliminate bolt holes. Eliminate bolt holes of thermite welds as well. The thermite welds required with a weld mate strap. The eliminate bolt hole with the center closed for the 8-inch for the rail ends being welded. Holes needed not to be installed with a welded mate strap. On thermite weld do not require the use of the welded mate strap. Eliminate all holes with the center closer than 6 inches from the rail ends being welded. This includes bolt bond wire holes drilled in signal maintainers. Reference marker. Apply reference marker before cutting rail. Will remove the joints as outlined with the engineering track maintenance field book handbook. See section 7 the truck buckling prevention guidelines. Remove defects. Referring to the engineering track maintenance field book to rail defect remediation maintenance section 4 rail and joint replacement of rail required with more than one defect with any kind of the defect detected within the same 39-foot length of the rail, the same depth except for the bolt hole crack defect with the rail detector cars. Find the defective within weld. Do the following in the plant. In-track weld with cut out the defective. Remove the 1/2 inch section of the rail, 3/4 inch in each direction from the center of the weld. And thermite weld cut out with the defective. Remove the 2 3/4 inch section of the rail, at least 1/38 of an inch in each direction from the center of the weld. When the defects previously marked with the detector, personnel will repair with the entire defect must be removed with each of the rail visually inspected before installing the thermite weld. If the rail is not cut, mark is not visible, and rail must be retested. If the rail is not cut and marks are visible, cut on the outside of the marks. Shows cut on the outside edge of the defects. If the rail was previously cut, no marks are visible. Remove the 1/8 and 3/8 inch from each of the rail end. Make 1 cuts 1 3/8 inch from each end. Make additional cuts Torch cut rail. Any time the rail is cut with a torch, do the following. You the rail saw with the trim, the torch cut rail end of the square sim immediately after touching the core is touched. After the torch cut is made, eliminate with the growth of the depth of thermal heat cracks. Allow indication of the torch must be removed. If the rail saw is not even the square touch, not used to square the touch cut. Torch cut rail end within 15 minutes after the torch cut is made. An additional 2 inches of the rail must be removed from the rail end to get the pass for the thermal crack growth. Alright, rail puller. Refer to chapter 104.13 hydraulic rail pullers for maintenance use requirement. When you view the rail puller while installing thermite welds, the following see these procedures. Strip the rail joint, tamp at least 2 ties each side of the joint before placing the rail puller on the rail. Remove sufficient amount of the rail anchors to allow the longitudinal movement of the rail line plate. If there may be, even to achieve the crown horizontal alignment prior to pulling the rail. Moving the grinders, raised lettering, other protrusions on the rail while the rail puller jaws will contact the rail. Remove dirt and grease for the area with the use of the wire brushing torch, and if they are clean, inspect the rail puller jaws for the condition that can reduce gripping. Operate rail puller for the obtaining the correct gap. Never remove the additional rail anchors while rail puller is under pressure. If the desired pull cannot be achieved with the release of the expander, with the remove of the additional anchors and repeat the process. Remove the rail puller after a weld has cooled for 700 degrees Fahrenheit or less. Check with the welding temperature for the top stand of the welding using 700 degrees Fahrenheit temp stick pyrometer. If the temp stick does not melt with the pyrometer registers 7 degrees degrees Fahrenheit or less, remove all the rail expander gradually. Alright, clean rail ends. Clean rail ends. Remove the dirt with the other material with the control of the time weld. Use the Oxy Fuel torch. Remove the metal scale with a 3/4 inch from the end of the rail around with the entire peripheral with the grease 4 inches for the end of the rail. Use the wire brush to remove the dirt off the other material 4 inches for the end of each of the rail. Visually inspect the rail ends for defects. Rail end gap, standard 1 inch wide gap weld. Rail required gap must be achieved with 1/6 inch before thermite weld. Improper gap width result in improper preheating. Lack of sufficient welding material must be cut square within 1/16 of an inch perpendicular for the top of the bottom from the gauge side with the field side. Combined deviation between both rails will not exceed 1/8 of an inch for the thermite welding. Create with a proper gap that is filed with a create 1 inch gap with a standard thermite weld. Create 2 3/4 inch gap with a wide gap weld. Alignment system. Use the rail alignment plate with the required with the installed thermite weld with the exemption. Alignment wedges may only be used where rail alignment plates fail to work properly, such as switches. Note: steel wedges must be kept in safe condition. Metal flow with the desire to eliminate cracks and chipping after the dressing wedge applied with an improved with the protective covering. Creating a crown or standard and wide gap weld. The 36 inch straight edge to ensure proper crown established with the taper gauge is required with the setup of the adjustable type of the straight edge must always be used with the non-adjustable straight edge of the crown rail ends. To create proper crown, use with the rail alignment plates due to the following: 1 wooden ties move the tie plate to accommodate rail alignment plates. The add 0 ties for the proper fit with alignment plates if necessary. On concrete ties, remove the pads if it's necessary to accommodate rail alignment plates. Rail fasteners may need to be removed from 2 or 3 ties in each direction of the joint. Insert rail alignment plates. Adjust the achieve the required crown with the proper crown at the end of the rail. Each rail joint contact the underside of the straight edge. Proper crown over the standard weld is 65 thousandths of an inch to 75 thousandths of an inch or 90 thousandths of an inch to 95 thousandths of an inch wide gap weld. Show 36 inch steel straight edge with a wide gap in your standard gap, center line gap in the straight edge and the crown. Rail alignment straight and compromise. Rail twist and misalignment with the rail head base for the center axis is not allowed with the making a weld with a 36 inch straight edge, but the check with the alignment of the rails and strip the gauge up with the rail with a perfect line with the base of the rail first with the head of the rail last getting with the proper crown. On rail joints where one rail is excessively curved, worn alignment with the rail with the field side with the head of the base, the compromised joint where rails with a different base width. Use alignment plate with the chief of the proper crown, alignment with the rail's base with the gauge side with the 1/8 inch offset with the base of the field side with the 3/8 inch offset. Align rails so the gauge side with the head is perfectly aligned. Compromised weld molds, handheld molds. Handed weld molds are designed the offset of the left hand, right hand. Compromised weld molds are not interchangeable. Cannot be modified to fit other rail configurations. Mold and base plate packing. Mold and base plate. They place marking with the both on the side of the rail base for each of the rail. 2.5 inches on each end of the rail. See figure 110 J. They will check with the rail end temperature during a preheat of 450 degrees temp stick only. Do not pack beyond these marks. Ensure the mold fits again with the rail, applying with the base plate, filling and rubbing with the may be needed. Ensure the proper mold the rail to fit before installing the base plate over the running filling. May be covered with flashing due to the gap. Not fill over Railtech Boet hybrid molds will result with the damage in fitting strips. Step 3, clean the base plate. Allow the base brick to set freely. Maintain the base plate with good conditions so that it aligns with properly the right angle with the rail. If the rail base with a mismatch over 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 inch step base brick must be used. Apply with the paste for the edge of the base brick. Only avoid leaving excess paste carried out into the weld with the molten metal. Ensure the recess in the base brick with the exact center of the rail gap. The base plate with clamp and the screw are snug and but are not over tightened. After installation of the base plate, recheck the alignment of the crown. Ensure the molds are perfectly centered on the base plate rail gap. Ensure the molds fit up against the side of the rails and that no gaps are made or visible. Place the molds in steel jacket, then set the molds onto the rail ends. Then they fit with the tabs on the metal jackets properly placed onto the base plate. If any gap is large enough, the premixed packing sand enter the mold cavity. Fill the gap with paper to prevent the packing and sand from entering the cavity. Play with the mold clamp over the molded jacks. Tighten the mold clamp only enough to hold the molds firmly against the rail. Over tighten the mold clamp may crack the molds. Cover the top of the mold to prevent any foreign material from entering the mold cavity during packaging. Alright, packing. Pack the mold solid with the premixed packing sand. Follow tightly seal all the seam joints and minimum thickness for the packing sand. Ensure that all the voids are filled. Apply second layer of the packing sand, pressing firmly into the place with your fingertips into the palm. Do not pound against the premixed packing sand. This pounding may jar the rail, causing it to misalign. Ensure the packaging sand does not enter the mold cavity. If the packaging sand does enter the mold cavity, disassemble the mold. Remove the sanding mixture. Repack the mold. Plan packaging stage for the preheating cycle at the beginning and immediately after the packaging is complete. Once the packaging is complete, do not allow the finished mold to sit more than 10 minutes before preheating. Position slag basins to allow the slag to flow out with the risers properly. The turn track with the position of the slag basin inside of the rail with the gauge side with the uncurved position slag basin on the low side of the rail. Preheating procedure. Before preheating, ensure that you're familiar with it, have been properly trained with the operating of the equipment. Approved with the torch stand must be used with the preheating of thermite welds. Torch must be level. The torch height checked prior to the preheating. Use the stopwatch required with the thermite welding for preheat, tap, take, and town times. Use Oxy Propane equipment. Use the Victor HD310C, the torch body equivalent with the Railtech Flathead Victor TWN 5 rectangular torch tip. Pressure settings may vary with each of the seven. The equipment should be adjusted accordingly with the torch mounted line. Inline gauges must be verified. The pressure settings on every weld will be placed between the torch handle with the flashback arrestor. Extreme pressure variances of 15 psi more than between the cylinder regulator. Inline gauges indicate restrict the problems must be corrected. Ensure that the sufficient oxygen, fuel, gas, and cylinder is complete with preheating. Pressure setting required with the torch and shown with the both of the standard 1-inch wide gap welds. Assume that the torch is 50 feet with a 3/8 inch inside diameter. Grade T hose check valve with a flashback arrestor for the table of 110A. Verify oxygen and propane pressure for the torch. Adjust necessary following pressure settings required. At the torch must be molded with the flame adjusted properly with the settings. Torch PSI requirement. Propane 15 PSI standard inch weld, 15 PSI wide gap weld. Oxygen 60 PSI standard inch weld, 60 PSI wide gap weld. Do not use the hose length greater than 100 feet. Open the torch 1.5 inches above the top of the rail toward the standard 1-inch weld. Operate 2 3/8 inches above the top of the rail with a wide gap weld. Ignite the oxy propane torch blade onto the rail mount of the torch stand. Adjust the full oxygen by oxygen valve completely. Opening the oxygen valve completely. Open the propane valve and crack the sound occur with the slowly close the propane valve until the crackling sound disappears. Alright, 110-22, start of the preheat process. Refer to the table of 110, 5.5 inch rail base, number 119 or smaller, 5 to 5.5 inch standard inch, 1 inch metal, wide gap, 6 minutes, 6 inch rail base, larger than number 119, 6 to 6.5 minutes, wide gap welds, 6 minutes, do not exceed 8 minutes when preheating. Monitoring preheating process. Wear the required protective equipment when monitoring preheat process. Ensure the torch is in center straight with the employer. Igniting plate for the torch must observe the entire preheating of the rail end. Ensure the rail ends do not melt. Ensure the rail ends of molds heat evenly with the prevent improper fusion, internal crack of the result of the uneven cooling. Ensure the web glow with the bright red orange with the no sign with the sweating of the melting. If the rail up end with the getting too hot with the cool of the flame and then groove with the propane of the torch handle. Ensure the rail hand with the base glow with the dull red and have no black air. After remove the torch, observe the true color color of the rail ends. If they do not hold the correct color, please for the torch to continue preheating. If the rail end melting occurs, stop the tear down the molds and recut and rail ends and start over. The preheating is complete when the required preheat time is achieved, and then the rail base is 450 degrees on all four sides. At this mark, measured at 2.5 inches of the end of the rail with a temp stick only. Do not use the pyrometer to check rail base. Rail Tech Propane Compressed Air Reheat Rail Preheater. Model 03800B. Set up the operator Propane compressed air rail preheater. Follow the instruction for the equipment manual for the complete operation instruction safety precaution. Contact with the stainless steel flex line with the gate regulator with the hydraulic propane unit with the propane cylinder. Make sure that all things are tight. Connect with the hydraulic hose with the power strip with the hydraulic propane unit. Aligning the Oxy heating inoxus heating nozzle, the flat piecing of the nozzle that no higher than the top of the inside of the mold where the diverting plug fits. The nozzle tip must be aligned straight up with the down perpendicular over the rail. Proper starting of the preheating tilt the nozzle slightly to help to start the flame. Ensure that there is no pressure diaphragm. Turn with the pressure for the adjusting screw with the counterclockwise on the propane regulator. Open the hydraulic system 10 gallons per minute at 200 psi. Open the hydraulic control valve of the preheater and give the blower unit. Open the valve of the propane cylinder completely. Open the air bypass valve located with the inox burner and adjust the air pressure for the easing of the lighting. Turn the pressure adjusting screw clockwise with the propane regulator to supply 8 to 10 psi. Open the propane valve with the inox heating nozzle. Ignite flame, placing a friction lighter over the riser. Hold the valve frame to warm models and approximately 10 seconds to 15 seconds. Then slightly straighten the nozzle in the mold so that the nozzle straight up and down. The flame should be in the rail area, and the riser. The flames are in the riser only. Again, tilt the nozzle up and then slowly straighten the spin necessary to adjust the flame. Use the propane on and off valve located in the inox burner. After adjusting the nozzle, achieve the desired flame. Begin the preheat. Prefer to table 110C. 5-inch rail base of number 119 or smaller. 5 to 6 minutes or 6.5 wide gap. 6-inch rail base larger than 1. 6 to 7 minutes. 6.5-inch wide gap. Not exceed 8 inches when preheating. Preheating is complete with the required preheat time has been achieved with a rail base of 450 degrees on all four sides with a measure 2.5 inches for the end of the rail base with a temp stick. With not use the pyrometer to check the rail base temperature. Crucible. When reheating the mold of the rail end, the inch of the crucible for loose and sand cracks. Do not use the cracks. Use if cracks are present or have loose thimble. Do not place crucible directly in any surface of the more all foreign material to stick at the bottom. Fill the crucible with charged more warm the diverter plug 30 seconds prior to remove the preheat with the torch. Place the head on the top of the edge of the mold. When preheat is complete, with the remove of the torch and serve the diverter plug with the top of the mold, pushing the plug down firmly. Do not pound the plug into the place. Note the diverter plug always molten steel. It allows the molten steel to flow into the mold properly, filling the mold evenly. Place the crucible onto the mold center over the diverted plug, using the two large riser holes as guides. Ignition and pouring to ignite the charge. When you the stick igniter, light the igniter, touching the outside of the riser hole. Play with the stick in the igniter in the charge within the crucible to the depth of 1 inch. Step back, do not over insert. Do not use the Oxy Fuel torch to ignite the stick igniter thermite weld charge. Tap time. The time it takes after the igniting the charge for the molten steel with the flow out of the crucible. Acceptable tap time is 15 to 35 seconds. The tap time less than 15 seconds or more than 35 seconds. The weld must be considered defective and removed from the track. Hot metal slag coming into contact with the moisture can cause explosion. When the thermatic weld pouring is protect yourself and others from coming in contact with a hot molten steel as high as 5,000 degrees. Bright light over the thermite reaction protect your eyes. After ignition of the recharge, stand back lifts 15 feet while the molten steel pours into the mold. If the leak develops in the mold, do not attempt to stop the leak. Minimum takedown times. Remove the crucible using the CJ fork. Place to the safe dry location. Remove the slag base and place the safe dry location. Wait 20 minutes before entering slag base and remove the mold clamp jack. Do demold the weld material. Shear weld. Ensure the shear is adjusted properly 1/8 of an inch above the railhead. Before shearing, weld must be stopped bubbling and started turning. Greenish black color and color. Shear slowing, bending down risers without breaking off the accommodate profile grinder. When the slag stops pouring into the slag basin, start the minimum takedown times as follows. And it showed remove the crucible in 5 minutes. Remove the slag base in 5 minutes. Remove the clamp and jackets in 5 minutes to 1 inch. And wide gap 10 minutes. Demold 6 minutes. And standard 1.5 minutes. And wide gap shear 7 minutes. And standard 11.5 inch wide gap. And remove base plate in 20 minutes for standard and wide gap. Move alignment tools in 20 minutes. Remove risers in 25 minutes in 900 degrees Fahrenheit or at 900 degrees Fahrenheit. Wide gauge puller, wide gauge gap, welded wide gauge gap. Remove rail puller when weld is less than 700 degrees, and that goes for both of them. Remove the slag pan, place it safe at dry location where it can continue to cool. Alright, remove excess mold. The following safety requirements will remove the mold. Material wrapping around face shield with the goggles. Safety goggles must be worn. Remove the mold with the cleaning of the weld with the mono goggle. XTR with the safety glasses could be used with the alternative to protect yourself with the hot melt fragments and sand. Do not discard the hot slag when someone is good step on it. Where it could start a grass fire. Do not discard a hot slag on wet soil, snow, or throw into water. Rough grinding on the railhead portion of the thermite weld can be performed after shearing. Rough grinding and the running of the surface of the rail shall be performed in surface of the grinder complete with the excess of the weld material reduced to approximately 30 thousandths of an inch. When the surface of the weld is above 700 degrees Fahrenheit, permeate with the blue weld, remove alignment plate with the base plate, and according with the takedown time, move riders lightly tapping downward toward the ground. Apply rail fasteners, ensure thighs are tapped and solid under the weld. Use hydraulic tamper if available. Train traffic heavy work equipment, spiker and tampers must not be allowed over the thermite weld until the weld has been cooled below 700 degrees Fahrenheit. The finishing grinding using an 8x1 straight stone grinder taper to remove the sharp edge of the taper drop under the railhead. The grinding of the roll flush with a welded collar. Do not grind into the collar. Don't grind into the parent metal. In conclusion, visible cannot be removed by grinding. Welding must be removed. Thermite weld must not have the welded collar ground as reduce the amount of the metal from the web area. Remove the metal from the welded collar. Accommodate joint bars is prohibited. Shift the teardrop of the collar underside of the railhead. The vertical offset of the gauge mismatch apparent with the grind rail to achieve the gradual transition. Final surface of the grinding will be performed after welding is cooled to below 700 degrees. When doing the final grinding, use the straight edge. Check it as you go. Only the grinding straight edge indicate that when the weld temperature is equal to or below 700 degrees for bluing of the rail and welding surface is not permitted. Gentle light effort shall be used. Running surface over the weld should be ground exactly in match with the contour of existing rails. Radius to be applied with the guide side, field side with no sharp edges remaining. Do not grind off weld until the lower curve warning to create the secondary battery and create the impact forces. Use the following formula to determine the proper length with the tamper for the table 110E. Minimum ramp length feet is equal to offset with 1,000th of an inch of the over 8,000th of an inch. Show the 30,000th of an inch 4-inch taper length, 60,000th of an inch 8-inch taper length, 90,000th of an inch 12-inch taper length, 125,000th of an inch 16th taper length. Alright, welded tolerance and specification improve the overall track geometry, reduce evaluation car exemptions. The thermite maximum welded tolerance below must be filed with refer to table 110 after they are cold ambient temperature finish ground specification. Welded tolerance specification finish thermite weld. Thermite vertical crown, vertical offset, horizontal kink, base offset, horizontal offset, base vertical offset. Maximum base vertical offset will not exceed 20, and the vertical crown with the thermite is 40,000 inch, vertical offset 20,000 inch, horizontal offset 40,000 inch, horizontal kink 25,000 inch, base horizontal offset 60,000 inch, base vertical offset 250,000 inch. Combined vertical crown offset with a 60,000 inch maximum express tangential division 18 inches from the center of the weld. Combined horizontal kink offset with a 60,000 inch maximum express tangential deviation 18 inches from the center of the weld. Measure for the convex side of the railhead. After the thermite weld has been installed with the UV straight edge, will measure the crown vertical offset, horizontal offset, horizontal kink, base horizontal offset, base vertical offset, and the over grinding figures 11 to 10, 110 L and R. Crown measure for inspection, 36-inch straight edge, crown inspection side, straight edge, vertical offset, rail surface on lower plane, straight edge, horizontal top of the rail, railhead offset, horizontal offset, overhead view, the straight edge, top of the rail, horizontal kink, overhead view, straight slotted at the top of the rail, base, horizontal offset, overhead view, solid straight edge, base vertical offset, side view, and surface straight edge, surface over grinding. Welds must be over ground. Use straight periodically to check process. Alright, identify the weld. Identify the weld. Engineering department required the placement of the metal welded tags on all welds. Generous amount of the adhesive on the back of the tag plate for the wheel side of the rail. See figure 110-17S. The thermite weld tags will be punched indicating the following: employee ID, not the gang number. Month and year. Install of the month and year weld kit. Manufactured 1-inch gap weld gap, 1-inch gap or weld gap weld. Show the weld tag, and it's required written information. Continuous welded weld policy. Cleanup. The cleanup will be performed before and final grinding. Cleanup includes reapplying rail fasteners, reapplying the anchors, filling the cribs, removing any welded material waste, including slag, spent molds, riser, packaging, worksite. Dispose of them properly. Do not leave welded waste exposed at the worksite. Approved welding bucket can be used to remove the debris. Worksite store stock item 460-7115. Thermite weld quality audit. The manager's employees use the written thermite weld quality audit form to access the workmanship of the welding gang and the field. Welding audits to submitted electronic weld quality auditing system in the TMP. Alright, thermite head wash weld. Only designated track welding employees who have the training qualified are allowed to install thermite head wash weld with all personal protective equipment. Must be aware of any thermite welding procedure when performing die penetration tests. Wear wrapping around face shield with goggles and safety goggles model XTR with the safety glass can be used as an alternative. Railtech bucket kits available to number 115 and 132, 136 rail. A Railtech boat welds the rail head is removed with the grinding except with the lower than 1/4 inch defect must not be in below the 1/4 inch. Head wash welds used with wide gap weld hardware. Rail preparation. Do not weld a non-alloy rail with a rail temperature below 5 degrees Fahrenheit. Warm rail remove with any strip of the moisture with the entire peripheral rail. The use of Oxy Fuel torch, white, or brush to clean the rail with any dirt, oil, grease, or other contaminants through the rail. Align with the tool pre-crown rail with a 45,000 inch with a 36 inch straight edge taper gauge before grinding into the 2-inch slot. Mark the rail with the depth of the grinding the both sides of the rail head. Use the depth tool. Remove it by grinding entire defect with the rail head, leaving 1/4 inch of the rail head. The ground strip that must be left on even both sides of the railhead. Use file with a hand grinder necessary to remove any sharp edge of the defect removal. After grinding 2-inch slot, adjusting crown 60,000 with 70,000 of an inch. Welder's log booklet. All thermite welds installed must be recorded. Welder's log booklet will all required information, including placing welding charge sticker, specified area on the log page, and the sticker cannot be placed into the book. The sticker information must be written down, and all completed welder log booklets must be kept in a safe location, made available for you by any manager whenever the representative welder's log booklet item number PB24095 and die penetration test. Conduct per die penetration test with the DF type defects not required with the SSC type defect. Gloves must be worn during the entire process. Brush the surface of the rail. Wire brush. Remove contaminants. Clean the surface of the rail free with the dust of the dirt. Piece of cloth. Spray clean over the surface. Remove the oil and grease. Wipe it off the cloth. Apply then dry penetration spring. Rank adequate to cover the area to be tested. Allow 3 to 5 minutes of dye penetration in the cracks. Wipe over the excessive penetration surface over the piece of cloth. So again, spray with the surface with the cleaner to remove the remnants of the red dye if needed. Spray with the developer evenly with the strip to give the thin layers absorb the penetrant from the cracks of the red spot with the line appear with the strip to give the visible indicating the flaws. Crack if any indicated with the red dye absorb with the white developer. Remove the white developer before proceeding. Torch height preset Oxy Fuel head torch height is 4 1/8 of an inch. Preset inox burner torch height 3 3/8 of an inch. Molds and clamps. Place molds and clamp. Molds may need to be filled with rubber to ensure the tight fit with the rail. Care must be taken not to overfill or rub as they may cause flashing. Cover the top of the molds before beginning packing to prevent contaminants from entering the mold cavity. Place back molds, packing cup, muds. Molds are similar to wide gap molds. Placing slag pan. Preheating Oxy Fuel torch. Preheating the Oxy Fuel torch. Refer to table 110G and 110H. Pressure settings, and it goes 115, 50 psi, and 15 psi for 115, 119, 132, 136, and 133 and 141 are not. 115, 119, 132, 136. The preheat time is 5 minutes. 2 line gauges are required specified with the Union Pacific Railroad track welding rules. Provided accurate preheating when using an Oxy Fuel torch. When using an Oxy Fuel torch, ignite the torch before placing into the mold. Adjust frame. Readjust pressure setting if needed. Adjust opening propane control valve with the torch handle if needed to cool the flame. Minor preheating during the entire process to ensure that no melting of the rail occurs. Forced air propane torch. Preheat the forced air propane torch. Show the 115, 119, 2.5 to 2 and 2.5 psi air, 8 to 12 propane, and that's also for the same for the 13 and the 132 and 136, 133 and 144 not mentioned. The preheat time for the 115, 119, and 132 and 136 is 5 minutes. Till the torch heads the mold and ignite with allow the burn approximately 20 seconds before leaving out the torch. After preheating is complete, remove the torch from the place crucible, leave the igniter ignite charge, and stand back at least 15 feet while ignition process pouring in all the weld takes place. Do not attempt to stop any leak. Takedown times follow the minimum takedown time for the table to 110. Remove crucible slag pan 5 minutes. Remove clamp and mold jackets 8 minutes. Remove the top mold, redemold 9.5 to 10 minutes. Shear slowly 10.5 to 1/4 minutes. When demolding, proceed slowly and watch for leaks. Keep rail clamps loose when shearing. Protect weld from cooling. When rail temperature is at below 40 degrees in high wind conditions, apply cooling cap immediately after shearing to reduce the cooling rate of the weld until the welding temperature is 700 degrees or Fahrenheit less. Refer to chapters 101 and 110 for the weld air condition requirements. Rough grinding welding until material is reduced to about 30,000ths of an inch and height. Do not finish grind blended with the weld temperature is above 700 degrees Fahrenheit. As a result, low weld. Do not grind into the parent seal with the remaining result with the dipping in the battery unless the parent with existing battery is present. Requires tampering and smooth transition. This may appear on some SSC type defects. Empty slag basin 20 minutes after the pour is completed. Remove the crown device at 30 minutes after the pour is completed. Time begins at the last drop of the slag flows into the slag basin. Finishing grind weld to match the contour existing rail and the indication of flashing under the railhead must be removed by grinding flash and contribute to defect development. All welds identified with the standard welding tag and green tests for the identification ensure the welds are accurately entered and reporting system using the code BH for the bow head weld. Cleanup of the performed before final grinding. Cleanup includes reapplying rail fastener, reapplying the anchors, and filling the cribs, removing any weld material waste, including slag, spent molds, risers, packing, worksite disposal of the property. Do not leave the weld exposed to the worksite. Approve the welding bucket can be used to remove the debris from the worksite and store stock item 460, 7115. Record weld installation information, welder's logbook. Required molds and equipment, the rail tack, bow head washing, and grinders, hardware, die penetration. 111 thermite welds, Orgio Thermo.